Hi, how are you?
Oh, well, thank you.
Redmond, here. Jalali,
Here.
Naker,
Here.
Prince,
Here.
Tao,
Here.
Tolbert,
Here.
Yang.
Here.
7 present, no one absent. Item number 2, Min 21-30, approving the minutes of the October and November 2021 HRA meetings.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Yang. Roll call, please.
Redmond,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The minutes are approved. Item number 3, Resolution 21-1719, approving the final 2022 HRA budget and certifying the final HRA property tax levy payable in 2022 citywide.
All right, this is there, and I know the version got in here that we'll be voting on got in here about an hour or two ago. Director Goodman, if you have anything to add, otherwise I know Director McCarthy should be on and he can walk over the changes from presented probably a month ago now. I don't recall when we wrapped up. I think it took us about 3 meetings to get through the budget, so I can't remember the date. Director Goodman, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. I do not have anything to add.
Director McCarthy, are you on?
Yes, Chair Tolbert, I'm here. Yeah, at a high level, I can walk through the changes from the last time we spoke about it. At a high level, you referenced the HRA levy as part of this resolution. There's about a $609,000 increase in the HRA levy from 4.5 million to 5.1 million for 2022. The main changes that are included on the attachment here, there are several technical changes that are really about making adjustments to existing budgets to either carry forward unspent spending authority or make corrections or revisions to estimates that we had in the proposed budget back in August. The changes made and recommended by the HRA board include delaying the low-income homeowner assistance program, shifting some PED staff that were previously funded in the general fund to the HRA, and and using HRA resources to provide one-time funding for bike and pedestrian improvements and graffiti abatement work. And those are the primary changes that are detailed in the attachment that you have before you now.
Do we have any questions or comments from people? All right, if not, I think this is a good budget, and I hope people will support it. I appreciate the work of staff, especially council staff, Holly Houston. I know you spent a lot of time on it, as well as my colleagues and PED staff and OFS for working through this with us. I think it continues our investment, particularly in affordable housing. And I think our investment in neighborhood small business investment program will be fantastic and really get out money to help businesses. So thanks everybody for all your work on this budget. Any comments or questions? Anybody want to make a motion to approve? Councilman or Commissioner Naker, a motion, Commissioner Naker, to approve the 2022 HRA levy and budget.
Brenmelin,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
I.
Tao,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 4, Resolution 21-1717, approving revisions to the budget for the construction of a single-family home located at 1080 Ross Avenue and authorizing the execution of a development agreement with Green Affordable Homes of Minnesota under the Inspiring Communities Program, District 4, Ward 6.
Director Goodman.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Commissioners, I did just learn a moment ago that the board report had not been attached to the agenda. Kayla Shuckman, Housing Director, is here to give a brief staff report. I hopefully will answer all of your questions, and my apologies if that board report apparently did not get attached to the agenda sooner. I believe it's there now. Kayla?
Director
Thank
Shuck.
you. Thank you, Chair Tolbert, Commissioners. Apologies about that board report. This request is for a revised subsidy amount for the 1080 Ross project proposed to the HRA by Green Affordable Homes. This proposal was received as part of the Inspiring Communities RFP 6. The board approved a subsidy of $68,000 in February 2019 as part of the RFP selections that were brought to the board. Between then and now, the developer has been working on the project and has experienced some unanticipated development conditions and cost increases. The project, we're so excited that it is now at a place where it can move forward. We weren't sure if that would be the case. And with an investment from LISC through their Developers of Color initiative of $50,000, the project is now feasible and ready to progress towards closing, hopefully yet this year. The revised subsidy amount appears to be reasonable and is in line with HRA board policy of the $175,000 cap. The revised amount would be $153,000 approximately. So we're excited to see this project get to this point. This is another first for another developer in St. Paul, and excited to also have the opportunity to collaborate and support LISC's Developers of Color initiative. Happy to answer any questions. And again, apologies about the board report.
Thank you very much, Director Shuckman. Any comments or questions? Not motion to approve by Commissioner Yang. Roll call, please.
Brenmelin,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
I.
Tao,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 5, Resolution 21-1755, approving the decertification of the Superior Street Cottages Housing Tax Increment Financing District, District 9, Ward 2.
Director Goodman.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Commissioners, this item and the following two items are all administrative items relating to TIF districts. Debt Manager Jenny Wolf is here. We'll provide a very brief summary of each. Jenny?
Yes, thank you, Nicole, Chair Tolbert, and Commissioners. This first item before you is the Superior Street Cottages Housing TIF District, which was set up to build qualifying senior units back in 1998. It expires by its terms 4 years from now, but we're closing it early because the budget has been hit, meaning that we've received all the revenues within the budget and the obligation to the developer has been satisfied. So we're going to close this district. Now we're doing it by the end of the year so that the county can redirect those dollars in the 2022 tax cycle. So that's what's before you here. It will, any increment that cannot be spent will be returned as well after this action. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Naker?
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. So Ms. Wolf, my understanding is that we will free up the tax increment that we were otherwise collecting as part of the district, and it will go back to the jurisdictions, Ramsey County, St. Paul Public Schools, and the city. Do you have an estimate as to how much the city would expect to receive?
Well, the total taxes was about tax increment was about 68,000 from this district.
So we would get a third of that.
A third of that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Great. Commissioner Prince?
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. I just want to say I don't recall seeing many decertifications before us, and I am delighted on a couple of counts here. One that we're decertifying early. I really, really appreciate that. And secondly, that there are three of them on our agenda today. I think sometimes when we approve TIF and we think about these long-term commitments that we're making, it kind of feels like they're never going to go back on the tax rolls, and this feels good, and it's a really good time to be getting some increases to our property tax collections. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I was hoping maybe if we just ensure everyone knows any questions on all three of these decertifications, and if not, we can just go through them without having individual reports. So any other questions on any of these? Oh, Commissioner Prince?
I think maybe only that it was helpful to hear Ms. Naker's question on the amount of the taxes that are going back to us, and if we could have that on the other two, I think that would be just good information for us to have.
Okay. So on this one, I will take a motion to approve from Commissioner Prince. Roll call, please.
Renmoen,
Aye.
Jalali,
Yes.
Naker.
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 6, Resolution 21-1756, approving the decertification of the Carondelet Village Redevelopment Tax Increment Financing District, District 15, Ward 3.
Ms. Wolf, could you give us that information?
Sure. So Chair Tolbert and Commissioners, this district is decertifying quite a few years early, 17 years early. And this is because there was a look back within the development agreement that set up a method where if the project did better, then we deemed principal retired on their TIF note. So we were able to pay their TIF note off, complete that obligation early. And we also have pooling for affordable housing in this TIF district. So we are decertifying it at the end of this year so that we will not collect anything next year. And this was, just bear with me a moment here. This, sorry, I'm trying to get back to the amount. So this is about, sorry. Well, the amount collected this year so far is $924,000, but that that's a little bit skewed because there was a payment that was made late last year. And so it kind of came over. What I have calculated for others is the tax capacity. So the 533,000 of tax capacity is what will come back onto the tax rolls for pay 2022. So that is something noteworthy on this one. And as I said, we do have pooling for affordable housing, so we will make sure we maximize that spending before returning whatever our balances are to the taxing jurisdictions. I think that's the only thing that this TIF project budget is still active, but we just have paid off the obligation. So that's why we're closing it early.
Great.
Any other questions on the Grand Delay one? Not, a motion to approve from Commissioner Jalali. Roll call, please.
Grunwald,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 7, Resolution 21-1752, approving an administrative amendment to budget for tax increment financing plan for Economic Development Tax Increment Financing District for the Caseta project and approving the HRA budget amendment, District 9, Ward 2.
Ms. Wolf. what's your
Yes.
answer?
Chair Tolbert and Commissioners. So this item is a little bit different. This district was already going to expire this year, so we're not asking to have it decertified early. It's decertifying by its statutory terms. But what we are asking the board to approve is an amendment to the budget. We have to amend the budget in the year the district, before it expires. So we have to do it by the end of this year. And the reason we're amending it is because the schedule of payments that came in did not keep pace with what was originally projected. So we paid out more interest than we paid out principal on the TIF note. And so that's what we're amending, is we're moving principal over to interest so that our budget is set up to be what actually happened. And then we'll notify the county and the state that we've amended this budget in this year. And the amount collected this year was, or last year was $111,000 is how much the increment was. But again, like I said, it was going to already expire. So when the tax capacity information was provided for next year, this release of tax base was already included. The first two I did, the Carondelet and Superior, were not in those numbers. So that's the difference.
Commissioner Naker.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. So just to be clear, Ms. Wolf, the total amount that we paid out was the same as we expected to, but there was a different proportion that was principal versus interest, but the bottom line is the same.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Not, a motion to approve by Commissioner Naker. Roll call, please.
Grunwald,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 8, Resolution 21-1775, approving civil uprising funding allocations citywide.
Director Goodman.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Commissioners, for this item, Principal Project Manager Andy Hessness is here to provide a brief presentation. Andy?
Thank you, Director Goodman, Chair Tolbert, Commissioners. We bring this item to you today as a follow-up to a budget item which was in the current 2021 fiscal year budget. At the end of last year, 2020, the HRA included a budget item within the 2021 budget for a response to the civil uprising that occurred. So as we all know, during the COVID-19 public health emergency, on May 25th, 2020, Mr. George Floyd was murdered by Minneapolis police. And following that murder, there was a series of protests, and some of them resulted in property damage throughout. the Twin Cities, including St. Paul, in a variety of corridors. Much of that impact fell on our small business community. We had a variety of businesses either impacted, majorly damaged, or destroyed. And that damage was something that the HRA voted in that year to allocate some funding for the response and to assist in the rebuilding. So within the context of that, that history, there has been work by HRI staff to really identify what are the best ways to deploy these funds. And part of why we're bringing this so late in the year is there have been a lot of looks at different levels of government, including the state, to identify how they were going to respond to a variety of crises, including the civil uprising. So now the state of Minnesota has approved a program called the Deed Main Street program. That funding allocated through nonprofit partner organizations, funding to assist in a number of different items, including civil unrest response. So a partnership with the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation did apply for funds, which were awarded $8.9 million to be deployed in the city of St. Paul. So mirroring the criteria of that program, we are proposing to allocate $500,000, one half of the $1 million adopted by the HRA, to essentially work with it in tandem with those funds. So it could be deployed to the exact same projects as match, which there is a match component to that program, or it could just mirror the capital uses that support businesses to assist any business impacted citywide. So we do have that flexibility as we're proposing this program, but it would allow us then to provide that response directly to businesses. So that is half of our recommendation. The following half of our recommendation is to allocate $500,000 to the Local Initiative Support Corporation through a program they have launched called the Community Asset Transition Fund, or CAT Fund, you'll see in the materials. This program provides an opportunity for properties that have been impacted, that may be at risk of gentrification in these corridors where the damage and other sort of transition is experiencing it, and there's gentrification risk. The program would allow a nonprofit partner to step in, do some property acquisition, and allow then a long-term financing plan for these properties to get put into place. So it's an interim hold strategy. It allows nonprofit partners to partner with us and with LISC to be able to acquire properties rapidly, and then have those properties be able to either be developed, redeveloped, and in some instances, this is a great pathway for businesses to be able to purchase the buildings that they're in. So there's a variety of flexible ways that this could be used, but it really is a long-term strategy to figure out opportunities for business acquisition of property within corridors throughout the city. We are also proposing then to, because of the need to be able to deploy those funds quickly, reduce the ENS public notice period from the 45-day requirement in the ENS policy down to 10 days with a determination that there's a compelling need to do that in this case. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions from the commissioners.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Jalali.
Thanks. Well, first, I just have to emphasize what a huge deal it is that we've been able to get this funding from the state of Minnesota. I've been tracking this development, and I really appreciate Director Goodman, your leadership in, seeing opportunities like this, and the team at PED for helping us win funds that are really, really needed for rebuilding in the Midway and also just citywide COVID recovery. I have a question about the CAT fund and how it would work in practice. And really trying to just get my head around it from an everyday level. So, we have a number of businesses in the Midway that are BIPOC-owned businesses. They, run their business for a really long time. They don't own their building. Some of them are like clustered together and take up like a city block, and they all know each other, and they're working to try to basically, buy the property from the landowner. If this was available to them, how would that work in an everyday person way? Would they have to just reach out to the city, who then helps them connect to a nonprofit? Would they have to find a nonprofit to be their sponsor? Like, in terms of making this simple for the intended users, what's the easiest way to explain how the CAT fund works?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is a great tool, but it does have some complexity as a financing vehicle. So the way the city's participation would be structured, the HRAs, would be through what's called a master participation agreement. So essentially, by putting in our money into a project, we would insert that money into the project at 0% interest, which allows the overall interest rate to be brought down for the purchaser. So the program does require a nonprofit buyer. So in the case you mentioned, there would need to be a nonprofit partner identified. That could be either by the businesses or certainly LISC has some partners that they work with that could assist in that. What that would allow to happen would be the nonprofit partner would acquire the project, and then while all those relationships between the businesses and the ultimate structure of the deal were getting worked out, the nonprofit partner could hold the building, continue to own and operate it for those businesses, and then at the end of the day, whatever structure those businesses have decided upon, that structure would then acquire the property from the nonprofit partner. So a couple steps there, but it allows the nonprofit and really the businesses to be able to move quickly in the instance where there's a property acquisition opportunity from a landlord. And that's a good example of a project where there might be some complexity in figuring out those relationships and not having to figure all of that out on the front end, but giving the businesses some time to identify how that structure would best suit their needs.
Thank you. I might have some more questions on the mechanics of that, but from a place of just wanting to help people access this resource. So I might follow up just offline with more things. The other thing I wanted to just understand, just to make sure I'm understanding correctly from what it looks like it says in the resolution. So it looks like we are, where it says now therefore be it resolved, the board is allocating, these funds to be citywide. So it crosses out like certain areas and then it says citywide. So if we're creating, a citywide fund, what is the process by which, if an individual council member knows of needs, do they come to PED and ask on a just first come first served basis? Do we get it divided up across the wards? Like, how does it work to actually allocate this, knowing that the funds are not eligible for citywide use? How would that work?
Yeah, and some of those pieces, I think, still need to get fleshed out. We wanted to get these funds allocated during the calendar year. The program is structured as citywide. We had initially, and the reference to geography is for the first 500,000 I was mentioning. The Capital Improvements Fund, the LISC CAT Fund doesn't have the same sort of it's intended to be used for civil uprising response, but we didn't have any of those similar mechanics plugged into it initially. So the shift to citywide just gives us the ability to be able to deploy those funds, wherever there is need. That could be in the exact same corridors where the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation funds will be available, and we've got some description in the board report of those associated corridors, but it also gives us the flexibility if we know of an opportunity to support a project, we could do that in a different geography.
Go ahead, Director Goodman. I had a follow-up, but you might be about to answer it, so.
Well, I just want to say that, the part of the point was to leverage those other funds. So I don't know if we want to have a certain amount of time that we wait and see how much we are able to use there, and then go forward with other businesses. I just hate to use up the funds without having that leverage, and then not be able to use that. That program is just getting ramped up. So I just want to just throw that out there.
And my last follow-up, and then I know other council members want to ask things, is it was my recollection that the deed Main Street grant funds, so the 8 million or so that we're accepting, the parameters were that they are to support businesses impacted by, and I think the guidelines were written a little more broadly, like as to the events of last year, which could include pandemic impacts. It could include civil unrest and uprising, which was like a huge part of the original intention, which is help, businesses impacted by unrest. So when we basically put it into this resolution, do those state funds still stay within that intention and we're just allocating them to where they're supposed to go in our budget? Or does this change the uses of those funds based on how we're structuring it? I think because it's coming as part of something else, I'm just trying to understand how it all fits together.
Yeah, great question, Commissioner Jalali, Chair Tolbert. So just to be clear, the funds we're talking about are HRA budgeted funds for civil uprising response. The 8.9 million allocated by the state deed is actually allocated to the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation. So nothing about this action would change those funds, how they'd be deployed, the eligible categories for business response that would meet. This would just allow us, there is a portion of that program that requires a match from a non-state source. So we could deploy these funds in parallel with those funds with our own targeted criteria here, but that wouldn't preclude the full 8.9 million being deployed for any of those other eligible uses within the state program.
Okay, and to access the deed funds, we would direct folks to the foundation that was the grant awardee essentially and work as their city partner.
That's correct.
And then this is separate, parallel to that. Okay, just trying to understand how it all fits together. Thank you. This is really helpful.
Commissioner Naker.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert, and thanks so much, Mr. Hesmus, for this helpful report. I think my questions are similar to Commissioner Jalali's question, at least about eligibility. I guess I'm wondering whether these funds are still restricted to businesses that had some sort of damage done due to civil unrest. It's been, some time now, and so I'm wondering if that's still the criterion, or if general impacts from COVID over the last year and a half, especially as we expand citywide, are also make a business eligible. And then I think my second question is just, I know we allocated these funds some time ago, and the idea at the time was immediate assistance to businesses that at the time were really struggling, had plywood up, were just reeling from the effects of everything that was going on at the time in spring of 2020. And so I'm just wondering why it has taken us so long to allocate these dollars.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Commissioner Naker, Chair Tolbert. So the program is structured. We've left it somewhat flexible. I think our business community experienced civil uprising broadly. We have maintained a list of properties that were directly impacted in one way or another. Certainly, board ups, direct damage, all of those things were impacts to our community. So we've left the funds in the category of response to that, but left it a little bit flexible as far as how we would deploy that relative to the impacts businesses faced, because we know they faced many different kinds of impacts. And I think to the question of the time it's taken to prepare this, we really did want a sense of how the state funds were going to be deployed so that we could best leverage them and enhance them. And that program went through the entire legislative session last year. Numerous PED staff and our partners participated in the advocacy for the program that ended up getting approved, and then the ultimate application and design of that program. So it really wasn't until this fall that we had a sense of now there are funds available for this type of response and what the parameters would look like of a match component. So we did wait. It took a little longer than I think any of us ideally wanted to, as far as identifying how these funds would be deployed, but this allows us to really take advantage of that large investment by the state and our partners at the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation to deploy these in a way that's going to work towards rebuilding.
Just as a quick follow-up, Chair Tolbert, I appreciate that. I think I think communication on this, though, has been somewhat lacking. I mean, when we allocate $1 million of our HRA dollars to a use, it's great to leverage other parties, of course, but the assumption, at least on my part, is that those dollars are going to be spent for that use as soon as possible. And if it turns out that we're then actually waiting for something else to happen, I think it's just important for us to know that and have the opportunity to decide if those are still dollars we want to hold on to until that other entity finishes its work or not.
Great, thank you. I do have a couple questions. Realistically, Mr. Hesses, when do we think we will start getting this money out into the community?
Sure. So
the non-LISC part.
The non-LISC. There will need to be taking the allocation, if approved today. Staff would develop that into program criteria and application process. That can happen relatively quickly. We are working and in connection with the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation around their application process. This will have to be somewhat of a separate process, but we'd like to be able to mirror some of how they're soliciting applications and projects for that. So we'd be looking to develop that, as soon as the funds were authorized into a program that could be deployed, certainly in the first quarter of next year.
Okay, so that program will be created in the first quarter of next year, or the program will be created and allocation will be able to happen?
I would imagine that we could start getting projects out towards the end of the first quarter. It's all dependent on kind of some of the parameters of what the structure and process we put together, but that seems like a reasonable timeline.
Okay, and I know we have a very high viewership of our HRA meeting, so I suspect there's hundreds of businesses watching this, but for the businesses that might be watching it, if they wanted to apply, what should they do right now? Should they email you? Is there a website, or when will program applications kind of be available, or how do we direct people that might read about this in the newspaper, we'll say, or are watching live?
Yeah, I would start at this point reaching out to our business resource line, email address, those sources where we can start collecting those interested businesses. We'll generate a list, and then as soon as those program materials are ready, we would put those out through all of our channels, and certainly share it with all the commissioners as well to make businesses in your areas aware.
Okay. I think it would be helpful when this becomes available for businesses if we could just get a quick staff update at a HRA meeting around that time, so that we can do a full court press of promotion for businesses that may be able to apply for this. So I'd appreciate that. Commissioner Prince.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Maybe we should state what that business resource line is, if we could, for anybody watching. Does someone have that?
I don't have it in front of me. I suspect Tina Sheldon could name that off the top of her head.
Thank you, Andy. The Business Resource Center email address is businessresources@ci.stpaul.mn.us. And the phone number is 651-266-6000. Is that correct? You guys agree with me on that? I'm questioning myself live.
You can visit, otherwise, if you're watching the PD website, I think has the links or the proper things. Otherwise, Commissioner Prince, we could give him your cell phone too. I don't know.
Chair Tolbert, they can call Tina Sheldon.
Thank you, Ms. Sheldon.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? So we'll look for an update when the program's ready to go. For the 500,000 part, the LISC, I think, is set to go, and they have their program already set up. And I think both, Hennepin, Ramsey County, and City of Minneapolis have all been a part of that LISC program, is my understanding, for at least a year or so. So we're just adding on to that. All right. Commissioner Prince, I see your hand up. It might just be a leftover. Okay. Any other comments or questions or whatnot? Great. All right. I'll take a motion to approve from Commissioner Tao. Roll call.
Brenmoen.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. And let me clarify, I did have the phone number incorrect. It is 651-266-6600.
Very good.
Item number 9, SR 21-213, Citywide Business Assistance Fund Recommended Program Guidelines Staff Report.
Director Goodman.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Commissioners, for this item, Economic Development Director Martin Schickel is here to provide a report. Martin.
All right, thank you, Director Goodman. Chair Tolbert, I'm going to attempt to share my screen with a brief PowerPoint. We did attach the guidelines in kind of a simplified written form, and then I'm just going to do like a 6-slide PowerPoint to just walk us through some of the issues and some of the recommendations. So if you just bear with me for one moment. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. I cannot see what's happening, so just let me know if this is working. All right. Can you see it? I not see a nodding head. Good.
We can
And I
see it.
can't see questions or anything, so just please break in as necessary, and I'll try and be brief. So again, this is recommended guidelines for the St. Paul Business Assistance Fund. This has been a fund that's been around for quite some time, but as you know, we haven't ever really published or written guidelines for it. So that's what we want to do now. And the purpose of doing so is to basically allow us to be more transparent and clearly articulate the goals and purpose of this fund. This will also allow us to market the Business Assistance Fund and reach more businesses that might benefit, because we can post the guidelines on the web and everyone will know what the rules are and how to apply. And then ultimately we can outline the public purpose metrics that will be evaluated in our decision making about what to recommend. So briefly, the purpose of the fund is to provide financing to new and existing businesses for projects that improve and or grow their business. These would be projects that have not been able to access adequate financing from other sources. So this is intended to be a gap financing program. And of course, all proposals have to meet a public purpose. We have a number of criteria that we would show as eligibility. So who's eligible? Any for-profit, new and existing business located in St. Paul. At the very end of this PowerPoint, I'm going to put up a few sort of questions or policy considerations for the board to think about or discuss. Embedded in what I just mentioned here might be one where you would say, why only for-profit businesses? We would be excluding nonprofit businesses. That's a policy consideration, but we were aiming this at the business community, for-profit business community. Eligible use of funds. These would be for pretty much anything. This is flexible dollars, much more flexible, for example, than the STAR dollars are, but we could fund similarly to STAR building improvements. We could do equipment purchases. We could help with building acquisition or property acquisition. We could do working capital and inventory loans and also fund professional fees that are in conjunction with the completion of a particular project. Continuing on, this would be for applicants that have reached out to for assistance from other lenders. So again, this is truly gap financing, and we would require that any project leverage private resources or other sources. So we would only fund a portion of any particular project. We would never want to fund 100%. And at the very end, I'll do some more specific guidelines I can share with you. Certain information would obviously have to be provided to us for us to evaluate. So financial projections, for example, would need to be submitted. And if needed, especially for startups, PED staff will recommend technical assistance providers to help in developing these guidelines or a business plan if what we get isn't adequate for our review. And briefly, the applicant's request must serve at least one of the following sort of broad public purposes. Must create or retain jobs, must have a community benefit, and there's a fair amount that's embedded within that statement, so I'll go in just, I think, on the next slide in some more detail there. And another potential public purpose would be a positive impact for protected classes. So we would want to evaluate all applications based on public purpose and project viability. So for example, I mentioned jobs. We would look at the number of jobs that are created or retained. We would look at how many jobs are created or retained per every dollar of our investment. We would tend to think of less money, more jobs as being probably preferable over more money, less jobs, all things being equal. We would look at the wage levels that are being proposed for those jobs. With regard to community benefit metrics, does the project increase the tax base? How much private investment is it leveraging? Is this project happening in a lower mod income area? And is it redeveloping vacant space? As far as positive impact for protected classes, does the project increase diversity within business ownership? And are there increased job opportunities for community residents contained within the project? And then lastly, all projects would be looked at for their own viability. We would, this is sort of our underwriting process. What's the ability of the business to actually complete the project? And what is the ability of the business to repay this loan? I mentioned loan here, so I'm going to go into first some of the attachments that reference what we just asked for, and then at the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the specifics of how the money would get used. So some of the required attachments would be sources and uses, of course. We would want financial projections. Any new business or a substantially expanding business would have to submit a business plan. Existing businesses must submit business financial statements. Everyone has to submit personal financial statements. All of this is sort of standing underwriting processes and procedures that we would employ for this program. As far as financing terms, these are meant to be loans, not grants. So all financing will be provided as a loan to be repaid. We can be flexible with the interest rates and terms to best meet the needs of the project, but we would follow the current sort of standard rate and term that the STAR program is using, and that's a 3% interest rate for an 8-year term. Our loans can be subordinate to other private financing, and I would expect that that would be required for most of the deals we're participating in where there's a bank involved. And we would get all the security interest we can, including security on business assets, a mortgage if it's applicable, if the business owns the property, and certainly a personal guarantee will be required for all loans. So that's in a nutshell what the guidelines would look like. And some outstanding sort of decisions, which are more policy decisions that I would want to entertain here by this board would be, should this only be in the form of a term loan, or do you want us to be able to do grants or forgivable loans? In the past, out of this program, we have done grants and forgivable loans. So this would be a change from how we've deployed these funds previously, in that now it would only be for a loan. We're proposing that financing can't exceed $150,000 or 50% of the total project cost, whichever is less. And should we also require a minimum amount of owner equity as part of the capital stack? Previously, we have done some deals out of this fund that have exceeded $150,000. So again, this would be sort of a policy consideration, providing some limits and guides around how much we can deploy for any given deal. And then lastly, with regard to evaluation process, I sort of went through how we would look at a loan as to determine whether or not we would want to recommend it, and that's sort of standard underwriting processes as well as the public purposes that it meets. But in our evaluation process, do we want to reduce that to some kind of a point system? Should we require a minimum score to be met if we'd had some sort of a point system that we were deploying for that evaluation? So those are just some of the questions I would leave you with, and with that, I'm done and would entertain any questions you might have. And if you don't mind, should I keep sharing my screen? Because I can't really see anyone, so I don't know if I should get out of this or leave it up for folks to refer to, and I can go back, however you prefer.
I think you can undo it for now, and if we need to bring it up, we can bring it up. I know Commissioner Naker has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Tolbert, and thanks, Director Schickel. I think I'm just trying to situate myself in this conversation. So I'm sorry if I didn't understand something from the get-go, but the Business Assistance Fund is already an existing fund, and correct? And so I guess I'm trying to understand what guidelines currently exist for the fund and how these differ from those guidelines, or what sort of what's new and what's already existing, and kind of what's leading us to this conversation.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Naker, Chair Tolbert. That's a great question. So I think a lot of what I just said is how we've always done business with this fund. As I started out saying, part of the reason for the guidelines is to be more transparent. We've never actually advertised this fund per se. When we talked about our resources, we've mentioned that there are other sources of funding available if some of the more common ones that we do advertise, like STAR, CDBG, for example, don't work. But we've never put this out as a program per se. So that's one of the big changes, is just simply being transparent about it. But much of what I just told you is how we've always operated. I think some of the changes would be, we have used this money in the past for forgivable loans, for example, and now we're saying let's just do loans from it because we want to be repaid because the source is scarce and we want to revolve it. So that's a change. Another change is that we haven't had an upper limit as to how much we would deploy for a particular project. So for example, we did a deal out of this program a couple of years ago that was in your ward, and that was a $200,000 deal. So now that deal would be too large as it was, and that was also a forgivable loan. So that deal that we did a couple of years ago wouldn't be eligible under these current guidelines. So we're tightening it up. But that's about it. As far as the public purposes, those are our standard public purpose metrics that we've always deployed, and we would underwrite it the same way we've underwritten it, with the exception that now we're, again, want to make sure that it can be repaid as a loan.
So then just as a quick follow-up, Chair Tolbert, are you recommending that we that we establish a maximum amount, or is that, I guess I'm wondering what your recommendation would be for some of the answers to the questions that you're proposing.
I'm sorry, did you say Chair Tolbert or myself? I misheard you there.
Through Chair Tolbert's permission, I was asking you what you were thinking that the recommendation would be.
Thank you, Commissioner Nicker. No, those would be our recommendations, would be to cap it, again, because the funds are scarce. I think, in fact, in the budget action just taken, we've reduced it slightly from what we had originally budgeted. So we would propose capping it, and we would propose making it as loans. That yes, it's our proposal, but we're bringing this as a staff report because we want to make sure we get your input and feedback, and the intention would be to return with specific written guidelines and criteria that could be adopted in resolution form at a subsequent HRA meeting.
Great. Commissioner Yang?
Thank you. Martin, would you be able to send out a list of businesses that have received the funding in the past, maybe like 5 years or so, so that we can see that?
Absolutely. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. And then also, can you explain the evaluation process right now then? Because it's, you've asked us whether we support having a score system or any sort of system. So what are we doing now with the evaluation process then?
So the evaluation process we've used in the past, is that we've taken it to our resource team for evaluation of public purpose and basic viability. And then ultimately a recommendation to either sort of move forward based on our evaluation of the public purpose and the basic viability would be made. And if so, then it would go to our credit committee for an actual risk rating so that we can be transparent about the riskiness or the viability of the deal. And then it would be brought forward to the HRA for action. So that's how we have done it. We haven't, in our board reports, of course, we list what the project is. We talk about the risk rating and the viability, and we detail what the public purpose elements of the project are. That's how we've done it. If somehow in that we want something that is more scoring matrix like or something, that would be sort of a departure. That would be something we would sort of add to it. So we've done that, but it's been, I think, in a way that is not necessarily scored, where we're again sort of evaluating each piece, assigning something, and then somehow trying to establish like a minimum that would be required in order for us to make a recommendation. And the one thing about this fund that's different than, for instance, the way the STAR program is now operated, where they do score it, is because the STAR program is competitive and they have to rank it and they have to figure out how to establish one relative to another. These are going to be deals that come in one-offs, right? They're not going to be evaluated next to something else and competing for some limited amount of dollars. And so that's why we've done it probably a little differently than perhaps some of the other programs.
So can you clarify, like in the future, are you looking to make this more, like to do more promotion around this then? Because I'm hearing you say that it wasn't promoted in the past. So maybe it was just like through word of mouth from a council member that maybe a business would know about it. So is that the plan then for it to stay that way, or for us to actually like do promotion? Because I feel like if we were to go that route where we do want to make it accessible, which I feel it makes sense for it to be accessible in the first place, then it also makes sense for there to be a scoring system, because you've already pretty much like carved out categories for what you are looking for from a business to be able to qualify in the first place.
So it would be our intention to advertise it, and which is the reason we would need to have guidelines so as to be able to describe the program. But we still would view this in our minds to still be a funding source of last resort. It's our most flexible and most limited source of money we have. So even as an application came in under this program, we would still look to see whether or not we might, for instance, be able to use CDBG on the project or another funding source. And so we would do our own due diligence on top of what we were expecting them to bring to us already for the work that they've done looking for other sources, so that we truly know that everything else has been exhausted that's reasonable before we would apply this. But yes, definitely would be promoted.
Director Goodman?
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. I just want to add a reminder that this item sort of initiated because we would be bringing items from this fund, and the commissioners would say, I don't understand. I don't know about this fund. How do I tell people about this fund? How do I direct people to this fund? I don't understand. And those were legitimate questions. So so this is an attempt to put some guidelines together that we can then put on our website, and it'll be part of your package of what you can share with businesses as you're trying to support them, and they'll know who to call and what the criteria are, and it'll just be a little more formalized. So, but it was in response to some questions that y'all, legitimate questions that y'all had asked over the past several months.
Yeah. Mr. Shackle, have we allocated this money over the last couple of years, the entire fund, or have we had leftovers every year?
I believe the balance has typically been rolled over year to year. So the only time we've actually gone through all of the funding is we used all of the funding to help provide, do the bridge fund in 2020. And then we replenished it, I believe, with CARES Act dollars. But in general, no, we've never gone through all of the dollars in one year. We've typically added about $150,000 each year, and we've, on average, over the years, used about 150 to 180,000. Some years a lot more, some years a lot less, but on average, that's about how much we've used over a span of, looking back over a 5 or 10 year period of time.
Commissioner Naker?
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. I do think that an evaluation matrix or rubric of some sort would be really useful. I think to your point, Director Schickel, that it's actually even more important, I think, because the applications come in on a rolling basis, to have a reason for saying yes, no, or how much, because you're not actually comparing against anybody else. You're comparing against what should be our standards for how these dollars are used. And I do think we need to be really, really explicit about those standards. And then I would just say, I think it would be great to maybe walk that rubric and the guidelines around to council offices so we can get feedback offline. I just personally, as I see the limit of 150,000 being imposed, I question whether having some sort of arbitrary limit like that, when the dollars aren't necessarily getting fully spent down and when this is lending of last resort, is really what we want to do, or whether we want to give ourselves some flexibility and have sort of a standard amount that we generally give, but allow ourselves to go above that for projects that we really want to see happen and we're the only ones who can make it happen. So I think those kinds of conversations I'd like to dig a little bit more into.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Nager. I would agree with that. I think, the goal here is to see some sort of at least basic floor standards that a business would have to meet, whether it's jobs or other things that we can hit, so that we can articulate why we funded a business and other businesses that were told, nope, we don't have funds available to you. I think that's the key. And I would agree with Commissioner Naker, have a general guideline if we want to say $150,000, but I think there should always be a way to have an exception of that. Obviously, we can do that through the HRA board. But the example that you brought up about I think it was $200,000 or $250,000 that we allocated, and I would assume 2019 for UPSI, that I suspect all the criteria, and they hit everything. They created jobs. They stayed in St. Paul. They had room for growth, BIPOC owned. I mean, all those, everything together, that was a great one. I suspect we'd be willing to go higher, or even Techstars, those I think we funded out of there. But I think for my colleagues, what what we're hoping to do here is put together that basic matrix and then have it come back. So if PD follows up with people individually, people think about what those matrix should be, what our priorities are, so that we fund the businesses, the type of job growth and business retention or business attraction that we want to have at the city, and get back to it. My hope with this is we approve a scorecard soon. I know that PD and the mayor's office wants to approve that soon. So what would be a reasonable timeline for at least a draft, and I say scorecard loosely, you know, we can call it what we want to call it, but draft guidelines of how we say a project meets the criterion or doesn't in this case.
Well, the next opportunity to bring it back for action, of course, would be, I believe, be the second Wednesday in January, and depending on the holidays coming up, depending on our ability to communicate with individual commissioners during that time period, you know, that would be the first opportunity, and certainly might be doable, because we've already sort of taken a crack at looking at what a more specific matrix might look like, that we could share with you individually and get your comments. So certainly by January 8th or 10th or whatever that date is would be the earliest. And if not, if that doesn't happen, if we haven't been able to roll it all together and get the comments, you know, certainly by the second one, I think would be no problem in January. So we're pretty far advanced on thinking about this, and depending on how much changes you'd like to see, I don't see that as a problem.
Do others have questions? Comments? Okay. So I guess the next steps on this one is to put together a draft scorecard that we can look over and react to, and go from there. And if people have comments or thoughts, reach out, and I suspect you'll email this to everyone in advance so that they can talk to you one-on-one, or if they have further questions. So, all right. Anything else on this one? Next item, Director Good, or Tina, or Michelle, then you should probably read it.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Item number 10, SR 21-213, Business Technical Assistance Recommended Program Guidelines, Staff Report.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Commissioners, for this item, Business Development Director Mary Rick is here to provide a staff report.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert, Director Goodman, and Commissioners. I am just working to pull up the right file here as well. Just give me 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes, okay. All right, so I am giving a staff report on the BIPOC Technical Assistance Program. These funds were allocated in 2021. And just giving a little bit of context, as I think my colleague Andy Hessness gave some related and important context to his item. We know Black, Latinx, Asian, and Indigenous people within St. Paul and Ramsey County were disproportionately impacted by the recent COVID-19 global pandemic and the social unrest that followed the killing of George Floyd. We also know our region was already suffering from some of the worst economic disparities in the nation. The majority of this funding was allocated by the HRA last year after these historic events, with the goal of supporting BIPOC-owned businesses with technical assistance. We believe there needs to be targeted support in order to meet this goal and drive economic development, wages, and jobs in St. Paul. Here's a quick slide with some of that background. So 250,000 was most recently allocated, and then we also had a balance of 73,000 that was already previously allocated and retained for business technical assistance. Our recommendations for this funding are twofold. One, to develop a capacity building grant program that would be a one-time opportunity offer one-time grants, flexible in nature, to organizations serving the BIPOC business community and or historically disadvantaged communities with business technical assistance. These could be up to 25,000 would be awarded to the top 10 applicants in a competitive process is our first recommendation. And I'll go into more detail about that. And then secondly, to provide direct training and approve 10 scholarships for women of color entrepreneurs to participate in the Certified Access Academy, which is at a rate of $5,000 each. The sources for each of these in the total budget would be $323,000, again, coming from the recent 250 and the 73,000. 250,000 would be directly granted to business support organizations through the competitive process. We have 23,000 recommended here for contracted program administration, and then 50,000 for the training scholarships. Our goals with the capacity building grants is that funds would be used for general operating support, program development, or direct technical assistance. Funds would be designed to be flexible and build the organization's capacity to serve BIPOC entrepreneurs and the small businesses in historically disadvantaged communities and cultural districts. There's a list of some of the target services that we're looking at here. It could be small business financial services, it could be technical services such as design, architectural, legal, marketing, site search, business development, or other tech business services. We would not be restricting, but wanted to be able to provide some examples. The eligible organizations that we're recommending at this stage would be organizations in good standing, not necessarily nonprofit specific, but those that are able to show that they have a track record for serving BIPOC entrepreneurs and small businesses in these communities, and that preferences would be given to forward-looking proposals to serve BIPOC businesses and those in this community and effectively leverage the funding and build long-term capacity. We would be asking for an application. We do not have those guidelines or the application finalized at this stage, which I'll say more about in a second. But we would ask that they give an overview of who they would be serving, proposed use of funds, and then we would also be requesting an annual report. And these are some of the outcomes or metrics that we would ask for in that report. But given that it would be flexible funding, we would certainly not expect that all of the awardees would be hitting these numbers, but also to exemplify the direction that we're thinking. These could be numbers of entrepreneurs served, number of hours, number of businesses launched, dollar amount for financing secured, and revenue increased. Our proposed timeline for this is fairly swift. We are hoping to, in this meeting, a goal for this program would be, sharing our recommendations with you, getting feedback, and then hoping to move into a professional service agreement with a local partner in order to finalize those guidelines and the actual application. We could certainly come back with the resolution around the final guidelines, but would hope to move forward with a professional service agreement pretty quickly. That grant administrator would finalize the application, outreach materials, hopefully by the very end of January, and we could announce the program in February and really get things moving pretty quickly. So that's program one. And the second program is our direct training recommendation. Certified Access is the name of the organization. This is Certified Access has developed a new academy, which you can see here. So they're working in 3 different areas. They have a consulting practice, they have an academy, and a summit. Their work, as you can see, is really focused on increasing the number of certified women of color-owned businesses, and have developed an academy that is incredibly unique. the combination of this program was put together by local leaders from Fearless Commerce and the Activate Network. They have a proprietary training program that fills a very unique need for business development and meets hero-led supplier diversity goals. We don't know any other trainers doing this combination of work, especially not with the intentional focus on women of color. I will also note that Hennepin County already made an initial investment in this organization and the academy, leading to a successful first cohort, and provide a very strong reference for this team. So you can see some of the Access Academy details here. It's an 8-week program focused on applying for local certification. So this is part of the SWIMBY certification. So you would actually be a certified small business or a certified minority business enterprise. And so they're very familiar with our local certification process. And so it would go through the nuts and bolts of our local process, as well as how to take that to market and how to build a strong business with some of the organizations in that system. So we see this as a really unique program. Their inaugural cohort, they had 18 businesses accepted. 94% participation rate for 8 weeks is pretty impressive. And then 10 businesses coming out of that have been certified. I just want to note, because I wasn't able to add slides to this report before it went out, but I've been working with Dave Gorski from Hero on a number of the stats, and coming out of recent public procurement reports, a couple things from the city in city and HRA spend in 2019 based on 800 million contracted. Only 2% of that amount was awarded to women of color owned businesses. 2% of 800 million in 2019. Another stat relatedly for HRA contracts between 2011 and 2016, only 5.3% of nearly 5,000 contracts were awarded to minority certified businesses. And I haven't been able to confirm the number, but much less to women of color certified businesses. So, that's the quick snapshot on those programs. The hope is that we would be able to move quickly into professional service agreement for the direct training program. They're set to start a new academy in March. I understand Hennepin County is going to be moving forward as well. And so this would kind of unlock 10 scholarships for St. Paul eligible entrepreneurs or businesses. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Tell.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. Mary, thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious, the first program, you said that $25,000 is given to an organization, and then and that $25,000 is to help one individual business, or how does that work?
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Tao, no, it wouldn't. It would be flexible. So, I mean, I think it would be rather silly to spend it on just one business, but we wouldn't be tracking or requiring a certain number of businesses impacted. If, for example, they needed some other, general use of those funds. You can see here, funds would be it could be for general operating support, or maybe to develop a new program, or for direct technical assistance that could go to one business or, potentially 100 businesses.
So what you're saying is that each organization could get up to $25,000 to do that work?
Correct.
And
yep.
Okay. And it doesn't mean that this $25,000 will be used as seed money for this business, right?
Nope, it would go to local business support organizations. So we did do, Chair Tolbert, commissioners, we had a fairly similar but not BIPOC focused program that we pushed through with CARES funding. that was called a Small Business Support Grant Program. And so what we would be hoping to do is design something fairly similar. But with that program, we were able to fund about 25 local business support organizations. Okay. So it's that same idea, but with a focus towards the BIPOC community and these corridors.
Okay. And so how is this program aligned with the financial resources in the previous presentation by Martin? Are we intentional about aligning these services and money, or are we just giving these money to these organizations and we don't know how they spend it, and then there's actually no pathway for these small businesses?
Chair Tolbert, commissioners, I think that's a great question. What I show here, I would specifically maybe look at the second bullet of navigating government financial and technical services, where the program that Director Schickel just outlined. If there's a local business in your ward or in your districts that's like, I don't know how to get, how do I crack the STAR code, or how do I get, the City Business Assistance Fund? There are a host of local organizations that are doing that type of work right now. They're currently doing, the majority of it without city support. And so I think it helps unlock more technical service providers and support for those types of agencies that are doing that effectively across the city. So they would not have to necessarily, access somebody on the city team, because they're already very familiar and could get that support from any number of organizations.
Thank you for clarifying.
Great. Thank you. So just a couple questions. The capacity building grants, is that just similar to kind of unrestricted seed money? Would you liken it to that for these business startups or expanding businesses?
Chair Tolbert, I would liken it to unrestricted grant money. I wouldn't call it seed money, because it's not going to individual businesses, right? These are still, if you're familiar with the term of like ecosystem partners, which has been one of the terms that I think has been popularized more with a lot of the recommendations around ARPA funding as well, where it's a way for us to invest in our small business ecosystem, but it wouldn't be seed capital specifically for an individual business. It would be for those higher level organizations that are serving many businesses in their corridor. This could be this could be a LEDC, this could be a ADA, this could be a NDC. With current design, it could be a MEDA. So a lot of those business support organizations that, if they're able to show their track record with this community, would be eligible.
Okay, so why would, okay. All right, so it's not direct business assistance, it's nonprofit assistance for nonprofits that help businesses that are growing in our BIPOC, correct?
Yes, essentially.
Okay. Are there more than, okay. And then the second part, would that be a better use rather than of our flexible money here? Would it be a better use to use ARP job dollars for this? This is a job training program, and I know, we're not in the conversations, but I know PD is involved in the conversations with the mayor's ARP proposal. Would it make sense to use that money towards this, because it is a pathways program? It sounds like a great pathways program. I'm supportive of it, but just wondering if that's a better use of these resources rather than our HRA dollars.
Chair Tolbert, in my understanding, especially because these funds were already allocated, and the commission was looking for recommendations around these programs. That was one of the reasons we've been moving for some time. and trying to stand up a program and some direct supports to get this money out the door. We are making related recommendations through some of the ARPA process. Director Goodman, I don't know if you want to share any more about that, but I think this is still just a small slice of the related need, and so any of that funding would just be very welcome and needed additions to.
Chair Tolbert, commissioners, I think just to add, there's a timing element of this program. It's coming up. The cohort's coming up soon. This is funding that's been approved. It's for BIPOC technical assistance, and it seemed to fit the description of the intent of the original funding, and it's moving quicker. So this was the recommendation at this time for these funds.
Commissioner Naker, then I see Commissioner Tao as well.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. I think this is a general comment on this program, but also on our programs in economic development in general and in housing in general. We're talking about a little over $300,000, and it seems like it's a very complicated program that we're building here that takes a lot of staff time, that by the time it actually trickles down, as I think Chair Tolbert was asking, to the individual BIPOC business owner, that there's not going to be very much juice left in the squeeze. I mean, we're $25,000 to 10 capacity building organizations. I mean, I don't know if $25,000 is enough to even justify the work that a nonprofit will have to do to apply to us for the money, monitor the grant, report back to us, and then actually do anything with it to help. I feel like we are often doing this where we sort of come up with very specific guidelines and a whole new program, and a lot of time and staff capacity is used. And then we don't have enough staff capacity in the department for other things. And I'm not sure if, I'm wondering if we're working harder, not smarter here, and whether all of the dollars perhaps going to one or two capacity building organizations might be a better call. Or if we do just want to, as I think was just asked about, have this be a portion of our business assistance program so that these $250,000 are dedicated to BIPOC business owners who apply through that program, but it's not an entirely owned initiative. I don't know. I keep feeling like we keep creating programs, we keep not getting dollars out the door. We're in December of 2021, again, with this program. And then I think I saw something about hiring a grants administrator even to help us do the granting. It feels frustrating to me that we're not moving this more quickly and we're making this so hard.
Thank you.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Naker, I can certainly understand the frustration of the timing to get this out. I would not characterize it the same as other programs that I think have been very intense. And yes, I listed a grant administrator, but we do have somebody in mind who did do the business support organization work and turn that around very quickly for us last winter. So I do think that the timeline that we actually have here is pretty, it is not too far off at all. And so when you say that, the juice isn't worth, I think on the one hand, we tried to split the difference where 50,000 would go directly to entrepreneurs that are going to instantly benefit from a training. Right, like this would be scholarships for their direct participation in this training on, how to get certified, how to leverage relationships with institutions, how to build their businesses. So by mid-March, you have 10 entrepreneurs that are directly benefiting. Super easy program. We're not doing anything. We just got to sign a professional service agreement. We already know the program. We already know the training. So that one I feel is really easy. And the grant guidelines, I mean, like I said, there will be some nuance in terms of how are you developing the final guidelines and doing some of the scoring. That I think that's just part of the package. But like I said, we have an administrator in mind. They turned it around really quickly, and I think we could get these funds out to community-based organizations. And by the end of Q1. Local organizations have, I mean, I know it's not a tremendous amount, but they could be hiring more consultants. They could be hiring a fundraiser. They could, they could get a lot more service hours out directly to local businesses.
Commissioner Talon, I'm apologize. I know I suspect people to go on, but if we got a couple more minutes here, then probably we'll just take a break before council.
Thank you, Chair Tober. I guess, the tension I have is that I look at this and $25,000 is not a lot of money. If it was up to me, I prefer that $25,000 go straight to an entrepreneur who need that seed money, who have already got some experience and has some relationship with how the city work. And, I think that's going to be helpful for entrepreneur. It's $25,000 as a grant. I don't know the organization that are taking these $25,000. Some of them might be successful, some of them might not. I don't think that's the issue here. I think the issue is how do we get $25,000 money into the hands of entrepreneurs so that they can do what they need to do. That's my thoughts.
Dr. Goodman?
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. I'll just add, and every comment you're making is completely valid, and I understand and agree with much of it. I'll say, though, that we have businesses who come to us for assistance, and they don't know how to put together a pro forma. They don't have a business plan. They don't have, I can look at some of their documentation in 30 seconds and see that they need someone to sit down with them. And our investment in a business who doesn't have their ducks in a row is less likely to be successful. So I have concerns in that regard. And I will say that investing in some number of capacity building organizations, developing relationships and supporting them so that as we have businesses who come to us, we can partner with capacity building organizations for some technical assistance is needed based on what I'm seeing coming from businesses applying for assistance.
All right, thank you. I'm going to wrap us up here just because we do have a council meeting at 3:30. I will say this: on the last page you had the deliverables, Mary, and I really appreciate that. I think I share some of my colleagues' concerns about whether the $25,000 will be the best bang for our buck compared to actually going to direct business assistance. But Director Goodman, I think you do make a good point of some people needed help in putting together business plans and basic things that, for example, I would have no idea how to set up as someone who's never owned a small business or tried to start one. And I think that's a lot of people who have the courage to put themselves out there and start a business. Usually one of the most courageous things that I think we see on a day-to-day basis is someone who's willing to bet on themselves and start a business, but just needing a little bit of help. So I do think, when we do get these numbers back, be curious if there's a better way to help folks, or if we can contract it out or whatever it might be. But I think overall, this is something that seems to be worth trying if it's not a huge staff time bite. And I believe this technical assistance is 2021 budget from what we passed last year. So I suspect some of the reason they want to get these money out. I will again flag that if we can swap out HRA or ARP money and roll over some of this money or use it for a different, more flexible.
Hello, everybody. This is Bernie Bear from the St. Paul Fire Department. I want to remind you about something very important: working smoke alarms. You need to have smoke alarms on every level of your home, inside each sleeping area, and outside each sleeping area. If your smoke alarm has a battery, you need to replace the battery every year. Your smoke alarms need to be replaced every 10 years. Smoke alarms protect the ones you love. Make sure they're working today. If you need to replace your smoke alarms or need additional smoke alarms, please call 651-279-5976. We can help. See you next time.
Hi, I'm Sarah with the City of St. Paul's Food Too Good to Waste program. We're at St. Paul College today to learn food preparation tips from chef instructor Nathan Sartain and some current culinary arts students.
Hello, St. Paul. Thanks for having us. Today we're going to be talking to you about a few quick tips for reducing food waste in your own kitchen. And first and foremost, we talk about efficiency in knife skills and safety and all of those things that go along with it too. But we're talking about efficiency. When you buy an onion, you buy the whole thing. You're paying for the whole thing. And if you throw 3/4 of it in the garbage, that's not a very good use of money. And it fills up landfills and such. So we're going to show you how to get the most